our last session here. Um, this to me is a very important part, and I hope that I don't want to be maybe uh, I don't know, mysterious or coy or anything. I want to be very clear and try to help you with some ideas about how we can determine the right kind of music in our lives. Um, I think it's so important because the devil has used the wrong kind of music to defeat a lot of Christians, to make them ineffective. Um, that they never do what the Lord wants them to do, and I think He's used that more than almost anything today. It's just something how surrounded we are with the world's music. But this last thing is really one of the most important things I want to talk to you about. And I think it's important for us to understand, because it was when I understood this that it made sense to me, is what makes the world's music right or wrong? What makes music right or wrong? And that's kind of what I want to look at. And again, I'm trying to give principles so you can apply this to music 15 years from now and say, okay, this is new, what do we do here? What does a Christian do with this kind of music? And so the music styles will change, music performers will change, won't be the same names 10 years from now. So that's why I don't think it's helpful to say, don't listen to, John Jones. I don't think he's a performer. Don't listen to him, listen to, and so I think that's not helpful, because John Jones will never even hear of him in 10 years from now, right? Or his style of music. So it's important to know the principles of why we want to determine good or bad music. So tonight, the rest of this session, I want to talk about the music itself. I want to not talk about the text for a moment. We'll talk about some of that. I want to talk just about the music itself, aside from the words, and I'll try to explain that so you understand what I'm talking about. We use text in music. We use words to maybe send a message, but there's also something else going on in music. And I would offer you tonight that the music itself has a message away from the words. And I hope you see where I'm going with this in just a minute, but I want to talk about this. So I want to talk about the music itself has the ability to communicate. And I'm going to use a term here that I hope this terminology makes sense to you, but I want to address the fact, or the subject of, whether the music itself is neutral. I told you just what I believe, that the music itself communicates. But there is a segment of the population, Christians, that says the music itself can't communicate. The music is neutral. This portion of Christianity says no matter how bad the music is, there's no inherent evil in it. And they also would say no matter how beautiful the music is, there's no inherent good in it. The music itself is neutral. So I want to establish that so it makes sense. There's also another term that we use, moral. So what this group of Christians would say, music is neutral. It's amoral. It doesn't have morals. It's not moral. In other words, it doesn't portray good or bad. It's just amoral. Meaning none, no morals. Okay, so so I would ask you tonight, as we talk about this, to not think of the text of the songs, and it's because we're not going to talk much about that, but we're going to talk about the music itself. If I was to ask, if I said to you, how many of you know Amazing Grace? Half of you would say, oh yeah, I know Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And you would identify it by its words. The other half of you would say, if I said, do you know Amazing Grace? You would say, oh yeah, I know Amazing Grace, da 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 da, and you would identify it by its tune. And so for the rest of tonight, I want to talk about just the tune, not the words. We're not going to talk about the words. We're going to talk about the tune. I want to talk about the sound itself. So in the dictionary, just to bore you a little bit, the dictionary definition of music is that it's an art and a science that combines voices or instruments with melody and harmony, rhythm, different aspects of music to form structurally complete and emotionally expressive compositions. That's the Webster's definition. Structurally complete and emotionally expressive composition. So it implies that it's a deliberate process. It's an art and a science that music is put together in a deliberate way. There are reasons that some things come before others in a musical passage. It's both an art and a science. Sometimes there's music that has a lot of form and structure to it. It doesn't make it better than other music, but it might be harder to understand. There's some classical music that has a lot of form and structure to it, and you might have to spend a lot of time learning about it to really understand it. And then there's music that's very simple and it's easy to, it's easier to understand. So the more form a piece of music has, maybe the more difficult it is to understand it. But actually, the word music comes from the word muse, which means to think. It implies that there's structure and there's thought going on. And we have the opposite of the word muse. Muse means to think. We have the opposite of the word muse, amuse, which means to be without thought. We have a word in English, amusement park. And we don't go to an amusement park to ponder the deeper things in life. No, we go to an amusement park, and without thought, we give ourselves to the roller coaster, right? So that's where the term amusement comes from, without thought, okay? So music is from the word muse, which means to think. So I want to talk about this. And so we're not talking about the words, we're talking about the music itself. So Webster says, and this is true, that the music is put together with thought, and it's to communicate emotionally. So songs express differently than spoken speech. Let me illustrate this. At the end of a movie, when the guy gets his girl and they ride off into the sunset and the violins begin to play, and what happens to the women? They start to cry. I will admit, I have had my eyes well up. Why is that? What brings a tear to the eye? What is it about? There's no words. It's just music. What is it about the music? And by the way, if you would see that scene without the music, you would go, this movie is going to be a failure. I don't know if you've ever seen some films without the music before they put the music in it. I was part of a film project when I was in college, and one of the things that we did was we were adding the music to the score, to the picture. And I watched this film, and I thought, this is the worst film I've ever seen in my life. And then they put the music to it, and honestly, it was one of the best films I've ever seen. It's a Christian film. But the music made all the difference. It was pretty interesting to see some of these scenes without music. This is really, I shouldn't take time to even say this, but last summer, I recalled a movie, a kid's movie that I had seen, that I showed our kids back. It's probably 35 years old. And so I showed it to my grandkids last summer. And it's a silly premise. It's two dogs and a cat that get separated from their owners. You probably know the movie. And they travel across the country looking for their owners. Okay, so it's live action. It's real, I don't know if it's puppets or whatever it is, but it's real. It looks like real animals, right? It's not a cartoon. So anyway, there's this whole ridiculous story, and they talk, and so it's a lot of fun for kids. It's great. But anyway, the end of the movie. So the lead character in the movie is this golden retriever, and something happens. I can't remember if it's a landslide or something happens, and the hint is that the golden retriever doesn't make it. And so they find the other two, the other cat and the dog, they find their owners. It's a great reunion, right? They find the owners. And it's the last moment of the movie. The camera pans out into this large field or yard or something. And over the hill comes the limping golden retriever. He had lived. And both my grandkids are just bawling. I read somebody said, that grew up in that era, said, the greatest moment of my childhood was when that dog came over the hill. So anyway, but that's that music swelling up, and here comes that limping golden retriever. He makes it. So what is it? It's hard. It's really impossible to explain. What is it that goes in our ears that causes us to have emotions? And sometimes just, people have cried like a baby because of the music, the swelling of the music. So music communicates emotionally in a way that words can never communicate. As I said, the best films out of Hollywood have the best musical scores. Speech and film cannot say enough to move an audience. There has to be music. So this is my premise, and this is what I want to remember as we talk about this. Music will always communicate something. Music will always communicate something. And I've used some silly illustrations about dog and a cat movie. But believe it or not, this is the dividing issue in Christian music today. This is the core issue that we must decide, or you as an individual, that I must decide. Because where you come down on this issue will determine everything. It will determine where you end up and what kind of music you end up listening to. That's why I mentioned that I think this is one of the most important parts of what I'll talk about. So the question is, does the music itself have the ability to communicate? And I would say it does. I think that, I'll go on to that, but I think it's very obvious in some things. But music cannot be directed words, as I said, but music communicates with emotions, and many times it's more powerful than words. So you might think, how did this issue even come up? Why are we even talking about this? Why would that be something to talk about? You come all the way from Indiana and talk about that. Why would you talk about that? Well, that's a very good question, because for the history of the world, if you look back at history, you look back at science, music, and I think if you look back at Scripture, I will show you in just a minute, no one has ever supported the neutrality of music except one group of people. Only Christians, only a certain group of Christians living since 1970 have said that musical styles are inherently neutral or have no morals, that music styles don't communicate. This is an idea that has been promoted only in Christian circles. Now, you can do the research, and I'm going to give you, actually, I meant to give you a handout I will give you a handout of some of the research that I've tried to do on this, and we look at the Bible and history, and I think common sense, they all agree. Music itself is not neutral. So we're going to talk about what the Bible says just real quickly. I've got to show you what history says. I won't spend much time on this. I'll just give you the handout because we're even going to look at even what unsaved musicians say about the music. Actually, this is an interesting note. Unsaved musicians, talking about rock and pop musicians, are honest about what their music is communicating. They know what the music is. And we'll look at some of them. So I want to say this right out, that the music industry today is very honest about their intentions. Rock stars have always known and admitted this. The world's music is not a success because of the words. It's successful because of the music, and the words are totally irrelevant. Now, there are words in secular music, but that's not what makes music popular. And we're gonna go somewhere with this. You may see where I'm going with this. But so the music has its own message. And who has defended this neutrality of music? Only backslidden Christians. And you can study it as I have, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'm meant to do this earlier. And this is I'm not going to go over this. Actually, I'm giving this so that I don't have to take the time. I will touch on a couple of things in here, but we're not going to go over the whole thing. But this handout is some biblical evidence, historical evidence. There's some musicians that speak here about what the music is and what it's trying to portray, and I'll help you see where this is going if you we'll follow this and we'll see where this is going. So music, in my premise is not neutral. it has communication. It communicates itself. What we allow in our minds, into our senses, by the way, what we allow, will affect our thinking, and anything that affects our thinking will ultimately affect our actions. And music communicates emotionally to us, and anything that communicates to us cannot be neutral. It has a message. It's either communicating right or wrong. We could talk about the TV and internet. You know, those mediums are expressing or communicating either right or wrong. Now that's not necessarily music, and I don't want to confuse you, but everything we touch usually has a message of some kind. There's something communicating to us from the medium. But I want to emphasize this, and I suppose if I was to say one thing, if you understand nothing else, this will help you in determining if a type of music is right or wrong for your home or for your church. Somebody has said that music is always the expression of a culture, whatever that culture may believe. Music is always the expression of a culture, whatever that culture may believe. So on the first page here, there's some biblical references, and they help us see that in the Bible supports the idea that music communicates on its own. I'm not going to read them all to you, but if you look down at Job, about halfway down there, Job 30:31, and this verse is just talking about music, not words. My harp also is turned to mourning, and my organ to the voice of them that weep. So it's saying that just the music, just the instrument itself is communicating emotion. We look at some verses, Job 35:10, I think that's at the bottom of the page. This is talking about divine activity, and it implies that anything that God does, of course, would have moral implications. God is not neutral. And that verse in Job 35:10 says, God is my maker who giveth songs in the night. Look at the next page. There's a verse in Job that says, when the morning stars sang together. So there are verses that they don't talk about text. They're talking just about music, not talking about what the voice talking or singing words. It's talking just about music. So in all these verses that are listed here, and we're not going to read them all, they show an activity of God, and if God does it, as I said, it has moral implications. God is not neutral, and music is a part of his nature, and that takes music out of the physical realm and puts it in the spiritual realm. So there's an interesting passage in 1 Samuel 16:23, and I think I've listed it there, so you can look here. You can turn your Bible to it if you like, but I've listed the verses here for you. And I want to read you this story, and I want you to see that the Bible, how strong the implication is from the Bible that music itself communicates. Music itself communicates. It's not neutral. So this is a story of King Saul in 1 Samuel 16:23, and I want to read these verses to you. It says, and it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took a harp and played it with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. So just to step back and tell you a little bit about this story, Saul was in deep trouble. He was troubled by his sin. He had rebelled against God. He knew that the kingdom was going to be taken from him. If you know this passage and what's going on, he knew the kingdom was going to be taken from him. God had revealed that to him through his prophet. And the story is David took a harp. David, the shepherd boy, took a harp. He played it with his hands. The Bible does not say that he sang words. The Bible says he played a harp with his hands. And because of that, the result was that three things happened. And the Bible lists them here. Saul was refreshed, and that is a reference to being physically refreshed. He was well. It meant that it helped his mental well-being. He was healed in his mind, is what the Bible is referring to there. And it says that an evil spirit departed from him. And some will say this passage was not about to teach musical principles. And that's true. It wasn't probably meant to teach musical principles, but if the Bible is the Word of God, this moment happened, and God is describing it in 1 Samuel. So we know that this happened. We would believe that God put it there, and that of course is true. So the author of this passage is saying that as a result of David's playing, Saul was refreshed physically, mentally, and spiritually. But there's something else that we miss, that maybe is missed from this passage, and that's a famous passage. And I want to look back at some verses right before this. So in verses 14 through 17, and I think I read, again, they're listed here, you can follow along. Verses 14 to 17 say, "But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said unto him, Behold now, an evil spirit from God troubleth thee. Let our Lord now command thy servants, which are before thee, to seek out a man who is a cunning player on a harp." And cunning doesn't mean sly like we use it. It means skillful, artful. "And it shall come to pass, when the evil spirit from God is upon thee, that he shall play with his hand, and thou shalt be well. And Saul said unto his servants, Provide me now a man that can play well, and bring him to me." So interesting. So when Saul was confronted with evil spirits in his life, he sought out advice from his servants, and what did they say? Find a musician. Now, let me ask this question. At that time that this happens, do you think that Saul or his servants think that music is neutral? No. They knew exactly what that music would do. The recommendation was very clear. They didn't recommend medicine. They didn't recommend psychiatric advice. They said, you find a skillful musician who knows what he's doing, and when he does it right for you, it will have the right effect. And it did. Scripture makes it very clear that these three things happened to King Saul. So I use that as a passage just to show you just quickly that the Bible does not support the neutrality of music. Just for time's sake, the second point is history doesn't support the neutrality of music, or that music is amoral. I tried to find quotes from people that knew what they were talking about. You may not like the person being quoted, and that is fine. Some of these are not the greatest people. But I quote them here, even some questionable people who knew what they were talking about, and they're expert maybe in their area. Aristotle says this is the first one there. It says, if a person habitually listens to the kind of music that arouses ignoble passions, his whole character will be shaped to an ignoble form. In short, if one listens to the wrong kind of music, he will become the wrong kind of person. This is Aristotle, 3,000 years ago or so, or maybe less than that, but over 2,000 years ago. But conversely, if he listens to the right kind of music, he will tend to become the right kind of person. Interesting. John Calvin said, down a little ways there, we know by experience that music has a secret and almost incredible power to move hearts. Max Schoen, who was a musicologist, and he's the next one here, says, music is the most powerful stimulus known among the perceptive senses. The medical, psychiatric, and other evidence for the non-neutrality of music is so overwhelming that, frankly, it amazes me that anyone should seriously say otherwise. Now, here's a guy that is known in the music world, new music world, as a very serious intellectual as far as the philosophy of music, and he says that it amazes me that anybody could ever say that music is neutral. That's shocking to him. So there are other quotes here. So these people don't think at all that music is amoral or neutral. Rock musicians, as I said to you, have never said that their music is amoral. Jimi Hendrix, and you'll know that name if you are older like me. This is not somebody we want to look up to, but he was an expert. He was kind of a founding father of the rock movement. And he said this. He said, you can hypnotize people with music, and when they get their weakest point, you can preach into their subconscious minds what you want to say. Rock musicians have always known what their music is and what they can do with it. there are other things here. I remember, I don't think this is on here. I was waking up. I used to listen to a talk show when I woke up. This is probably a long time ago, 35 years ago in Chicago. And I remember waking up one morning, and there was a famous interview by Barbara Walters. She interviewed Michael Jackson. It's a very famous interview in the secular music world. It was a big deal. She got the interview with him, and I woke up to that interview. It just was a coincidence that I just happened to hear that as I was waking up. And Michael Jackson he said this in that interview. He said, "I do what the music makes me do. Sometimes I look back at the tape and say, did I do that?" He said, "You have no control. I do what the bass asks me to do. I'm a slave to the music." So rock musicians have never been unclear about what their music is. They know exactly what the music is. We could move on. I won't take the time on this. I'll just mention it. You might know the term the Muzak Corporation. Now, it's not so as popular today because with streaming music and that, a lot of places have gotten away from it. But Muzak is an organization that built its empire. We call it elevator music. This soft music that was played in elevators or in restaurants and that kind of thing. So that's the Muzak Corporation. I don't even know if they're still around because the technology has changed. So it's easier for people to have their own music and pipe it into whatever their speakers in a restaurant or a business. But Muzak made billions of dollars in this science called stimulus progression. It's an exclusive concept of the Muzak Corporation. And stimulus progression, it takes the power of music in controlled patterns to achieve certain psychological and certain physical effects on people. Leading companies employ Muzak to improve environments, improve attitudes, improve performance, and they made millions of dollars influencing people with just music apart from the words. You know this goes on, and you may not even realize it. In a fast food restaurant, they don't play slow classical music. Because in a fast food restaurant, they want the people to keep moving. So fast music is played. Now, if you've never thought of that, it'd be interesting if sometime you see this. In a nice restaurant, where the idea is to stay for an hour and enjoy your meal, it's never fast music. It's very slow and soothing music. It's very interesting. And that is all that's done to guide people's to guide with physical effects on people. In a church, I noticed that I was in a large church once, and I would notice, we kind of noticed this, me and some of the guys, I was an usher, and when the organ or the piano played a very fast offertory, that offering plate just moved down the aisle. I mean, it went fast. But if they played slow, that offering plate just went like this. And it was amazing. And people were affected. They weren't even really listening to the music. It's just that music was slowly moving that offering plate along. Maybe all offertory music is slow. Right, yeah. Time to get to your wallet, right? Yeah. So, do you think that the Muzak Corporation thinks that music is neutral? No, they developed a whole science on this to change people's physical and psychological effects. And so anyway, I'm just going through this. I think common sense tells us that. I could talk about, you play a Sousa march in a room full of children, what will they do? They'll march around. Has anybody ever told them to do that? Nope. They're listening to what the music says to do. And they just naturally, at least some of them, will just start marching. It's very interesting. And so music is not neutral. I hope that we understand what I'm trying to talk about. So I want you to understand the effect music has on people. So let's look at just for a minute at rock music. People say, prove to me that rock music communicates. All you need to do, and I don't recommend this, is turn your TV on and look at a dance show. And people are doing with their bodies what the music is communicating. The words are totally irrelevant. I think about, this is going back to a little bit about what I said about common sense. I've traveled in foreign countries. It's very interesting to me, and I've mentioned this to people when I was with them. They play, in foreign countries, they play American rock and pop music, and nobody can understand the words. So this proves, in a common sense way, that the words are irrelevant. The people are addicted to or love the music. So the music is expressing emotionally. So that is very interesting to me. So what is rock music communicating? If the music communicates, then what is rock music and pop music today communicating? Well, you can watch what people do when they hear it, because they will do what the music is asking them to do. And so I've taken a long time to kind of go through that and try to prove to you historically, scripturally, and even in common sense that the music itself is communicating. So what is the culture trying to teach us with the music? So there are three themes over and over again in popular music and dance music and rock music. And I kind of use those terms. I might just use the term rock music, and I know sometimes it's not rock. It might be hip-hop or even country rock or just pop, dance music that wouldn't be considered exactly rock music. But I'll use the term rock just as a general overriding understanding of that, to use that term. So what is pop music? What is rock music communicating? Well, there are three themes, as I said. The first one is sensuality. Sensuality and sexuality and rebellion come up time and time again in all rock music and dance music. We know that. We know that because sometimes you'll catch words. You'll catch the rhythm of the song, and music can be very sensual and immoral, and that's what the music. One of the things that music is communicating. Rebellion. I mentioned that before, but I could give you quotes, of course, of what musicians say. And the one thing that stands out in this research is that sensual and sexual themes come up over and over again. You cannot separate pop music and its sexuality. You just can't. So this is where I'm trying to go, Christian, is that music is portraying something very specific. And we all know that, actually, don't we? We know what's going on there. So go look back at what we talked about this morning. Does that music line up with what God's character is? Not at all. It's actually kind of repulsive, if you think about it. The third thing is pornography. Robert Shaw, I don't know if you know the name Robert Shaw. He was considered in music circles the greatest choral director, like choir director, of the 20th century, and maybe for years and years. He's died now, but there was a Robert Shaw chorale in the 50s, and there was a very, very, very talented man. Unfortunately, I don't think he was ever saved. He had a lot of influence around him that was Christian, but he never accepted the Lord, which is very, very sad. But a Christian author interviewed him back in the 90s, a man named Kurt Wetzel. And Robert Shaw said this in this interview. Now, this is a man that probably knows as much or more about music than anybody alive. Okay, this is what I quote Robert Shaw. Robert Shaw eventually became the music director and conductor of the Atlanta Symphony and built that into a world-class symphony and the choral there. Anyway, that's for some that might know about that. But he said this. He said, I am aware of the controversy in Christian music. He's telling Kurt Wetzel this in the interview. He said, the church in Bach's day, Johann Sebastian Bach, understood the music in their congregations, but he said, I don't know if the church today understands the music that's being brought into the church. The people don't understand the music. And then he gave a brief description of rock music, and it was kind of graphic, so I won't say it. But and then he said, Wetzel said to him, so you think the music is very sensual? And very quickly, Robert Shaw said, it's perverse. This is, again, a man that knows more about music than most people that lived in the last 100 years. So these people have told us over and over what the music is and what it's communicating. And they've told us that the end result of the music is physical and it's sexual. So unfortunately, I know that that may upset some people. Maybe that doesn't sit well with some people, when that's talked about. But this is what the secular musicians are saying about their own music. They totally understand what they're trying to communicate. Now, they don't care because they don't have morals. They don't have, the morals that we want to have as a Christian. So they're not interested in that. So it's okay with them to do that. That's why they're honest about it. They're not, held back or something because they're a Christian. So there's a verse in James 4, verse 4. James 4:4 says, "Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God." God seems to say here that he condemns any Christian who loves the world or its culture. Now, the Bible says we live in the world, but we're not of the world. We shouldn't be consumed with the world's entertainment and styles and music. We have to live here. We are surrounded by it. We understand that. But it's just something the Bible talks about over and over again, that God condemns in very strong language here. He says, "You adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship with the world is enmity with God?" So this brings me to another quick point, is that our homes should be a haven from this onslaught, because it is literally, we are being attacked from every angle. I mentioned this morning that the world has devised an entire systems of music and noise and everything to take our minds off of God. Anything that will take our minds off of God. Because the world does not want us, Satan does not want us thinking about God. And he's devised this very successful way to do that in music and, of course, other entertainment, but music. So we don't want to expose our families to this if we at all possibly can. So we want to be honest about the music that's in the movies we watch. Of course, we want to be honest about the content of the music, of the movie, but we also want to be honest about the music that's in these movies. So someone has said there's no way you can walk with God and live a Christ-like life and continually have this music in your life. This is a quote from another musician. And then I want to just kind of close with this. And we haven't really talked much about, I try to give you an idea of what the music is communicating. And of course, the idea here is that, and it's something we haven't gotten into, but the Christian world, remember I talked about just a certain amount of Christians from 1970 have said, see, they've had to say the music is neutral, because if they would admit that the music is communicating something, then they would. What the world has done, what the Christian world has done, is they've taken secular music, rock music, pop music, hip hop, you name it, country rock, whatever, and they put Christian words to it. And they would tell you that cleans up the music, that neutralizes the music by putting Christian words to it. So by definition, I can take the worst possible music, and I mentioned this morning, hip hop, and all that culture and the vulgarity of that culture and its message, and put Amazing Grace to it. And much of Christianity would say, it's okay. The words clean up the music. And that's not true. The music is communicating something, and this is what's so important. So you see, do you understand why I'm saying that? The Christians have to say that the music is neutral, or they can't justify putting Christian words to it, because if they admitted what the music was, they would never put Christian words to it and try to sell it or sing it. So this is what's happening in our churches. Now, it's interesting. This is a whole other subject, but Christianity has never devised its own kind of music. Have you realized that? We steal from the world. So there is not a particular kind of Christian music that is only Christian. There's Christian country, there's Christian rock, there's Christian dance, there's Christian hip hop. There's all kinds of Christian versions, but there's no, and somebody said, I think Tim Fisher has written this book, he said, if the world would devise a new form of music, let's call it lawnmower music, and they build an empire on lawnmower, in a few years, there'd be Christian lawnmower. Because the Christian world would take that, no matter how perverse, and add Christian words to it. So my point, and I'm trying to help us understand, is that the music itself has a message. So it's not good enough to say, well, we can put Christian words with it and change the very message of the music. We can't do that, and be honest. And so this is why we have to be very careful of the Christian music that we allow into our homes and into our lives. Is the music itself worldly? As I've tried to show you what the message of the music is in the world. Is the music itself worldly? And if it is, then I don't want to bring that into my life, even if I'm putting a Christian words to it. Again, like something ridiculous, I say, take the worst kind of music and put Amazing Grace to it. And we would all say, that's ridiculous. Nobody does that. Oh yeah, they do. That's exactly what they do. And so to bring rock music into our homes and into our churches and just try to sanctify it by putting different words to it is not scriptural and really goes against what Scripture is saying. I want to tell you this story real quick. This is years ago, and I'll mention a name here that I don't even know if she's still popular, but Amy Grant came to Milwaukee and did a concert, and this is kind of, I think, at the height of her career. And the music editor of the Milwaukee Journal, his name is James Shute. He's an unsaved man. He wrote a critique of her the next day and you can pull this up if you wanted to. I really don't know when I could give you the date. I just don't have it here. But this is probably in the 90s. But he said this, and this is something I thought that here's an unsaved man. Listen to what he says here about Amy Grant's music. He says, the inherent problem with contemporary Christian music have little to do with Scripture. However, they have more to do with a basic misunderstanding of the way music works. This is an unsaved man talking about the music that she was singing, putting Christian words to rock music, okay? The assumption is that all you have to do is change the lyrics, and instantly what was once considered pornographic and degenerate becomes wholesome. He says the contemporary Christian musicians would have us believe that changing the words changes the music's very nature, as if the power of music resides in the words alone. Here's an unsaved man with wisdom that I wish many Christians had. They all make the same fatal mistake, that somehow the lyrics change the music's context, its subliminal message. More likely, the very opposite happens, that Las Vegas nightclub or rock concert atmosphere is sanctified through its Christian association. And he says later in the article, he says, the music inevitably overwhelms the best intentions of the lyrics and reinforces the worst intentions of the music. So I leave you with this. I thought that was just a very interesting article to hear from an unsaved man who was very honest about the music. And he's saying, Christians, you don't get it. The music is horrible. That's the message. And somehow they think that the words change that. So what I'd like to leave with you is that the world's music, country, rock, hip-hop, is communicating some of the most perverse and immoral and ungodly thoughts and acts possible, and we have no business putting Christian words to what the music is communicating. And that's really what I want to try to help us with. And this will help us determine if music is good or bad down the road. We can say, what's that music communicating? And if I'm honest with myself, and as a Christian, I'm always trying to be, Lord, help me be honest about my habits and my entertainment and things like that, because I want to be right with you. I talked this morning about, ask the Lord, Lord, should I do this? Is this something you would have me do? Or is the association or what the world is doing with it too strong? And again, we live in the world. We can't become hermits. The Bible doesn't want us to become hermits. The Bible wants us to witness and be out talking to people about the Lord. But this is something we have to ask ourselves. So the music itself, I said here, we have no business putting Christian words to what the music is communicating. So please, let me leave you with this, that the music itself has a message, and we have to be very careful what we allow into our lives, in our homes, because if we don't, like the children of Israel in Exodus, when our hearts are given over to this, we will try to bring it into our church. And this is what happened to Aaron. Remember, he was pressured to bring that worldly worship into God's worship. And that is, you might say, well, where'd you get that? Well, that's what's happening all around us in churches. I believe that it starts in the homes, and people listen to the wrong kind of music, and eventually they go to their pastor and they say, hey, why aren't we playing this kind of music in our church? Look at these words. These are great words. And pastors coming under the pressure to change their music. It's happening all over. It's kind of sad. It's kind of a done deal, unfortunately. It's just, it's happening all over. So we want to stay strong as a church and say we're only going to have Christ-honoring music in our church, but it starts, I believe, in the home. We need to be very careful about what we listen to. And believe me, the appeal is there. I grew up in the 70s, and the appeal is there. I've laughed with people. Music comes over, an old 70s rock song comes over the speaker of the restaurant. I know every word. What's the matter with me? Isn't it funny? I have a hard time memorizing verses, but I can tell you the words from a song 50 years ago. That's sad, isn't it? And I think we all struggle with that, because I think Satan is very strong in this way. He's put those words with certain kind of music, and it's indelible in our minds. And so we have to be very careful what we listen to as Christians. As I said this morning, Satan has developed perhaps the strongest lure he's ever conceived in rock and pop music, and now worldly Christian music. And again, God has given his word and his mercy, and it's up to us to do all we can to listen and have the right kind of music in our homes. And so I leave that with you. I hope that that's understandable. I was not trying to be deep. I'm trying to get those principles across, because I think they'll help you in trying to identify right and wrong in music. Go back to, what is the music communicating? It doesn't matter what the words are. What is the music communicating? And that helps me then to say, oh, I know what that music is. I don't want anything to do with it. Yeah, it's a catchy tune, but I know what that style of music is. And I know what the devil's trying to do with that music. So that's basically all I have to say. I would say, just real quickly, we're over time a little bit, I want to maybe take a second and just ask, do you have any questions that I could answer? We didn't go into a lot of things. I mean, I have a whole nother lecture on, country and rock itself, and what is this type of music, and why is it wrong? I think I've tried to give you as much as I could in a short period of time tonight. But any questions that I could try to answer? I don't, if you're going to ask me, is so-and-so a bad group, I might not have even heard of them. I don't know. I'm trying to. That's why I'm trying to give you principles so you can apply these things in your own life. But any questions that maybe I could answer? Maybe we can just talk just for a minute. That maybe I could help you with. You say, I'm aware of this. What about this? Anything at all that I could answer? And you think just while there's nothing to answer, I would just say, you may yourself not have a problem with this, but adults, I guarantee you, your children will. They're gonna be hit in the face with this. It's all around us. It permeates our entire society, everywhere we go. And so it's not enough just to say, well, I don't have a problem with it, my kids won't. I think we need to try to teach our kids, here's why this is not good. You can look at the lifestyles, you can look at the culture that is singing that music. That in itself sometimes is enough. Is that the culture I want to be associated with? Who cares what the words are? Is that the culture I want to be associated with as a Christian? You know, it's not. I said this morning or maybe last hour. Used to be, you could kind of live your life and not be affected by the world. Now I think people 100 years ago probably still say it was hard to, you know, you could be affected by the world. But we look back at the 1800s and say, you know, people, you know, were basically moral, and they you know, I don't know, they had good testimonies in their dress and in their music, you know. I mean, until about 1920, 1910, the world's music was serious classical music. then jazz appeared and it started kind of going downhill from there. But so, you know, you think back in 1870, you know, people listening to Brahms, right? So, you know, yes.
So, would you agree with this statement that the world classifies music today as entertainment, but every time Scripture kind of references it, he doesn't link it with entertainment. The Scriptures link it more spiritual in nature. So, would you agree that music is actually spiritual versus entertainment?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and that's something that maybe I try to express about. When you look for reference to music in the Bible, you find them over and over and over again. Music is very important to God, and we could derive from that music is a spiritual thing. And so to make it, and maybe I'm not sure where you're asking exactly, but I mean, there is music. I would say there is secular music, by the way, that is, I would say, is fine.
But would you still agree that it's spiritual? In other words, it is communing and communicating with the spirit of a man.
Yes, it is communicating in the spirit.
Good classical music, the effect that it had on Saul was a spiritual effect.
Yes, it is a spiritual effect, right.
It wasn't there for Saul to go and to be
Yeah.
to be entertained.
Yeah, so that's true. Now I would say this, that, you know, let's take a musical like The Sound of Music or something, okay? So that's secular music, Sound of Music. I use that because everybody knows what that is. And there are other things that are secular. I think that, but as long as they don't violate the spiritual principles, that music is fine. It's actually beautiful music. So the unsaved people can come up with beautiful things. An unsaved man can paint a beautiful depiction of a sunrise. He can also depict something terrible. But so like so an unsaved man can come up with the music of, say, The Sound of Music or something like that, and I believe that it's not wrong at all. I think God gives us that to enjoy. It's not violating any scriptural principles. So now I don't know if that goes into the realm of entertainment. I think there is. I kind of know what you're saying, but I think that maybe that, because that's not church music. It's not spirit. You know, it's not, in a sense, it's not worship music, but it's along the same lines of. That's why I don't have any problem with most classical. Now I will say that there is classical music that's not right. And you may not know it. Well, you can listen to it, and you might know. There are in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were composers that delved into some things that would be something a Christian shouldn't participate in. The same composer might have written something perfectly normal and right and okay, but then they delve into a subject matter that a Christian shouldn't be identified with. Igor Stravinsky wrote some beautiful music. Some of it's kind of hard to understand because it was kind of a modern 20th century classical music. But then he wrote some music. He wrote a pagan piece called "The Rite of Spring," and it is about pagan worship. And I don't know the story, but I mean, the rite of spring being some form of pagan ritual. And there, there are some words to that, but a lot of that music is, there's no words. But he depicts this worship of this pagan holiday or whatever it is. And I don't think a Christian should be involved in that, just because the subject matter. And you won't tell it, you won't be able to tell it. You can from the music. If you listen to that, you realize something's amiss here, because it's kind of jolting kind of music. But that same man then wrote some very beautiful things. But so I think there's some things that classic. I don't think everything classical is okay. Berlioz wrote some very beautiful music. He also wrote a piece of music that was he conceived in an opium high. And he had this dream high on opium, and he went back after he came out of it and wrote a piece of music that the world loves. But I don't think a Christian, just the subject matter, I think I don't need that. But he's a very famous classical musician. So you can't just say, well, all classical is good. I would say that most of it is, especially through the 19th century. But so there's good and bad. And so I think there's some secular stuff that's been written that is very fine. And I love classical music. But there are some things that I just never have wanted to get involved in because I knew what the subject matter was. So I think that, you talk about, there's some musicals that are entirely innocent, and they're just a fun story, like a Hallmark movie, with music. And so I don't think that they're wrong in themselves. I just think that you gotta watch out what's going on there. So I don't know. I probably didn't answer your question, but
I think you're hinting on it. I think that music as a whole, I don't care if it's Philip, Marches, Susan Marches,
yeah,
or Amazing Grace, that all, at least I'm starting to lean this way more in my mind, that all music actually is spiritual and it's not entertainment. There is sacred music. There's worship music that is between me and God, and music that we should involve in our worship.
yeah,
Not all music, just because it's spiritual in nature, means that it's sacred music or worshipful music. I just feel like that Satan was given musical abilities,
mm-hmm.
and he's a spiritual being. And so all music, God created music, and God is a spirit. So music exists, but it's not tangible, so to speak, if you know what I'm saying. So it's more of a spiritual thing. And if I think Christians were more aware of it being spiritual, I think we look for entertainment everywhere. And we're looking for it on Spotify. We're looking for it,
Yeah. Yeah.
concerts and shows. And, people are starting to they're starting to wonder where we're going to get our music. If we can't listen to the world's music, where are we going to get our music? Well, like you said, there's plenty of beautiful music in the world that is good.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily sacred. But as far as our Christian music, you get it from the church. You sing the hymns of worship. We write new ones.
Yeah.
So I think you're hinting on it for sure, but I'm also starting to lean more in my own mind on
That way. So I would say that music, if it lines up spiritually with what God gives us as far as what, things to stay away from, there's obvious things like content and to be honest with you, there's some association that we should stay away from. Maybe the Beatles wrote a nice song. I don't know. But I'm going to stay away from that entire association by not just picking out that one song. Well, here's this great Beatles song. I'm going to listen to it. So as long as and by the way, that's one of the issues with, you got a CD, maybe I'm dating myself, because nobody buys CDs anymore. You got a CD, and 5 of the songs are fine, and 5 of them are not, that's the problem, is that some of that is like infiltration. You end up listening to some of those songs, and this group does. There's a couple of Christian groups. There's a Mormon group out there. The Mormons have put out some decent music. You got to be careful because they believe that all music is neutral. So they're gonna all of a sudden have a rock piece. Certainly the Mormon Tabernacle Choir is a beautiful choir, and I think I'm fine with listening to it. You understand who they are, and if they delve off into one of their Mormon songs, I'm not going to play if there are Mormon songs. but, you know, when they sing the great hymns of the faith, which is interesting to me, because they don't believe in the same Jesus that we do, how they can sing something they're not, you know, they're saying about Jesus is Lord, and they don't believe that. But anyway, you have to be careful about these Christian groups. They would call themselves Christian, they're not, but they would call themselves Christian, and the music they put out, because some of the music, or buying the whole CD and saying, oh, it's okay because it's the one we've got in their choir, not so much. Because they're very easily gonna sing a secular rock song, maybe toned down a little bit, but they're gonna do that. You said something that made me think, but yeah, so I think that, you know, in one sense, so there is a school of thought. The dean of music at Wheaton College, which is kind of sad because Wheaton at one time was a solid Christian school, is not now. But kind of the intellectual musician at Wheaton, he says his idea is that God created music, therefore all music is good. Now that, I believe God did create music, but Satan has taken much of God's creation since the fall and has perverted it. So he's taken music and taken it some music and taken it a different way. So we can't just say, well, God created, you know, if you think about where that argument could go, then it could take you into all kinds of sin and problems. But Satan has perverted what God has tried to do. And God right now is allowing it. You know, that will come to an end soon, we hope. But that will come to an end when he will be cast in the lake of fire forever. But right now, his influence is very real. And he can take music and he can take art, beautiful art, and take it a different direction. And I don't even want to say the word, you know, what it is. But so we have to know that guy's argument is, and he's a well-respected musicologist, is that God created it, so it's all good. And that's just not true.
God created Satan.
What's that?
God created Satan.
Yeah. So, you know, you gotta see, and I think, and I read that and I go, listen, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, that's for sure. And I see that doesn't even work with, you know, God created music, so it's all okay. No, come on. And that guy's brain, he's brilliant. So what in the world, you know? But anyway, so the dumb guys in the world can kind of see through that. So anyway, that's good something to talk about. But I know somebody's taken that to the extreme too. Is everything's spiritual, therefore it's okay. And I think that if it lines up spiritually with what God says it needs to be, then it's okay, even if it's a, you know, Sound of Music or whatever. Or, you know, I'm dating myself, but I mean, there's decent stuff being written today. There's stuff that it's fewer and farther between, but there is some secular music that lines up spiritually with what God says, and therefore I would say it's okay. We just have to be careful. You know, I'll give you a name of a group because this is a big deal in Christianity. So the Piano Guys.